Hi, this is Seven Daughters and Seven Sons, Part 2, Chapter 2. Nazir worked hard. He did not have the leisure Amin, Uthman, or even I enjoyed. He was too busy in his shop to join us at the bath or the gaming house, too busy to take whole days from his trade to hunt with us or play polo, and only on rare occasions could he ride. Usually, the most he could spare us on a regular basis were a few hours in the late afternoon, when we would meet at his shop or our favorite gaming house. Although he worked hard and joined us late, he never seemed weary or cross. So sharp was his wit, and so clever his tongue, so warm his smile, that the time he was with us was the best time of my day. After we dined, Uthman and Amin often spent the latter part of the evening with entertainers, slaves who had been trained to sing and dance in Damascus. I did not. It was not seemly for the prince to appear in such company, and besides, I had all that I required of that sort of thing among the slave girls of the palace. Nazir never went along either. Night after night, Amin urged him to come along. Always he refused. Nazir, what kind of man are you? Amin cried in annoyance one evening. You don't hunt with us, you don't go to the bath with us, and you don't look for girls with us. Uthman shook Amin by the shoulder. Nazir doesn't have to explain himself. If he lacks our bad habits, the more credit to him. Hunting and bathing aren't bad habits. Amin's tone was petulant. I don't mind explaining myself to my friends, Nazir said calmly. I don't hunt because I don't know how. I come from a poor family, remember? We hadn't the money to indulge ourselves in aristocratic pastimes. You have the money now, Amin said. Yes, but not the time to learn. I do need exercise, though. I'm getting fat, like Jiha. He patted his stomach briskly. It did not look any rounder to me than it had on the day I had first met him. Later, perhaps, when I've got everything under control, I'll hire a hunting tutor. Nazir laughed. As for bathing, do I emit a foul odor? You choose to misunderstand me, Amin interrupted. I'm not saying you don't bathe. I'm saying you don't bathe with us. For me, bathing is simply a matter of keeping clean, he explained apologetically. You know that when you go to the bathhouse, you spend almost the whole day there. I just don't have the time to turn washing into a social occasion. I hope that doesn't offend you. Your friendship is precious to me. Perhaps Amin was jealous of the fondness that Uthman and I had conceived for Nazir. Whatever the reason, he was in no mood that night to let our friend off easily. What about the girls? He asked directly. Mahmoud doesn't go to see them either, Nazir replied, his eyes holding Amin's. Mahmoud doesn't need to. We do. Every man is different, Uthman said in a soothing voice. Not in that respect, Amin said. Not if he's a man. But Nazir was not to be baited. He merely smiled. Perhaps, then, in that respect, I'm not a man, he said. If you wish to avoid my company on that account, so be it. Some men are more fastidious than others, Uthman was still trying to explain. Are you suggesting that we frequent places that aren't clean? Amin asked indignantly. I stood up. This conversation has passed the bounds of propriety, I said. Amin, be on your way. Go wherever it is you have to go. Uthman, you go with him. since he appears to be incapable of taking 3 steps without company. Nazir complains of a lack of exercise. He and I will walk. And so we did. It became a habit. After dinner, Uthman and Amin would go about their business, and Nazir and I would walk along the quay. Amin grew increasingly morose and increasingly acid in the remarks he addressed to Nazir, but he really could do nothing about the deepening companionship between Nazir and me. Amin's credit, financial and social, depended heavily on the fact that he was my friend, and so it was important to him to remain on good terms with me, regardless of what I chose to do. Night after night, Nazir and I walked next to the water, enveloped by the warm black night. The only sounds that reached us were the wavelets slapping gently against the sides of the boats lying at anchor in the harbor, and the creaking of their planks and rigging. If we passed a khan frequented by sailors, we heard shouts of laughter or raucous singing, but it seemed to be coming from a great distance. The stars shone, and sometimes the moon. Later, when the rainy season came and the sky was frequently overcast, we picked our way by the light of the lanterns carried by my servants, one walking 20 paces in front of us, the other 20 paces behind. On such nights, it seemed to me that Nazir and I were the only 2 people fully alive in the whole world. We talked about everything. He knew little of science or philosophy. I had read widely in both areas, and he drank in what I told him with the eagerness of a thirsty man swallowing water in the desert. He knew as many tales of jinns and magic carpets as the storyteller who sat in the bazaar, and he entertained me with them for whole evenings at a time. We talked about politics and business. I told him how tedious, and yet how fascinating I found it to learn to rule. And he revealed to me the intricacies of international trade. He told me other things he said he'd never revealed to another living human being. He told me what it was like to grow up poor and despised. He spoke particularly of a wealthy uncle who refused to help his brother, Nazir's father, in any practical way, but called on him daily to boast of his own triumphs. He mentioned a cousin, a man named Hassan, who had rejected the idea of marriage to one of Nazir's sisters with sneers and insults. That pain still rankled, and was one of the main reasons, I was sure, for Nazir's passionate and energetic pursuit of money. But he never drew me into that pursuit. He never tried to sell me or any member of my family anything. Perhaps he had customers enough without us. But then, so did Abu Uthman, and that did not stop him from trading on his son's acquaintance with me. Nazir never tried to make use of me. He never tried to gain some kind of advantage from our friendship. Walking, talking, and playing backgammon were not our only pastimes. Nazir would neither hunt nor play polo, but after a while he purchased a red mare and went riding with us. He rode well enough, though he never seemed to merge with his mount in the manner of a truly skilled horseman. That may have been because he had not ridden as a boy. His father had been too poor to keep a horse. One day, when we were riding down a mountainside to the east of the city, Nazir's horse stumbled. Nazir rolled off and fell halfway down the hill. If he was not dead, I was sure he was at best marred for the rest of his life. When I discovered he had suffered nothing more than superficial bruises, I was so relieved I had to turn away so that Amin and Uthman could not see my tears. Afterwards, we discovered that Nazir's horse had tripped because she had thrown a shoe. A rider more skilled than Nazir could perhaps have held his seat. He rode back to the city mounted behind me, his arms around my waist. I was in a cold sweat all the way home, thinking how close I had come to losing the best friend I had ever known. Indeed, I thought, the only true friend I had. I would have been content if he never rode a horse again. Night walks were safer and more revealing, even in the dark. On those night walks I, like him, eventually spoke about things I had never mentioned to anyone, not to Uthman, not to Amin, not to anyone. I told Nazir how much I had feared my father when I was a little boy. I told him how, although I was surrounded by people day and night, my soul always seemed as alone and as naked as it is at the moment of birth and death. And then, one night, one black, starless night, I told him about the day my mother had died. I was 9, I began. I was 9 when my mother died. She explained to me about the wonderful thing that was going to happen. I was going to have a little brother. She was sure it was a brother. She never even considered the possibility that it might be a girl. Of course, I had many half-brothers and sisters, but this new one was to be a prince like me, because my mother was the princess. She was full of joy, and every day her joy increased. She spent hours playing games with me and telling me stories. We would have an even better time together, she said, after the new baby came, for then my father would join us, because he would be so happy that at last I had a brother. But the joy did not survive the baby's birth. He was a little prince, as she had known he would be, and he died the day he was born. They took me to see her. She hugged me and kissed me, and told me not to miss her, because she would be watching over me from paradise. Then she died too, and I did miss her, in spite of what she said. I've missed her ever since. I learned then that even your mother and your father cannot keep you safe from pain. I learned that they cannot always tell you the truth. I was too young for those lessons. They should have come later. Oh, Maulana, Nazir said softly. You haven't really loved another human being since. I had never thought of that, but I realized it was true. How do you know so much, Nazir? I asked. You just told me. I didn't tell you that, but you did. In the darkness, I smiled. Nazir could not see my smile. Now you tell me something, I said. Let's see if I can learn as much from as little. He did not reply. Come on, Nazir, I urged. It's only fair. I reached out and grasped his upper arm tightly. I felt a shiver run through his muscles, as if in response to my touch, and I, as if in response to his, felt my hand tremble. Hastily I pulled it away, as if I had grasped fire. Nazir began to speak, slowly. I've been luckier than you, he said quietly. I have a mother who loves me very much, and a father who always had time to talk to me and teach me. Perhaps poverty has some compensations. I never realized that before. Money brings so many responsibilities. It takes so much time to be rich. Not for Uthman, I pointed out. Well, he said, it does in the beginning. It does for me now. You've never had close friends before, I interpreted. You'd like to be able to spend more time with us. His voice was so low I had to lean closer to him to hear his reply. With you, Maulana, he said. With you. My blood surged with a sudden rush of joy. It was like nothing I had ever felt before. It washed away the melancholy that usually afflicted my spirits. He loved me. He loved me absolutely and without conditions. It did not matter what I said to him, or what I did or did not do for him. He loved me, and I loved him for him, and for what I was when I was with him, free, happy, and unconstrained. You're my friend, I said. I've never had a true friend before. Nor I, my lord, he replied, except for my sisters. Women can't be true friends, I said. It isn't in their natures. That's not true. His voice was sharp. My older sisters are too different from me to be my friends. They don't care about any of the things that matter to me. But the day will come when the youngest, little Darira, will be my friend. I know it. And Zainab could be my friend too, if she weren't so jealous of me. That's ridiculous, Nazir, I said. Women are concerned with children and housekeeping and adorning their bodies. How can you possibly share anything with any of them? Little Darira will never really grow up. Women are like children. As was your mother, he countered instantly. I was a child when she died, I reminded him. And you've never been close to a woman since. Maulana, you know nothing about them. I was annoyed. And you who won't go out with Uthman and Amin, you know? He did not get angry. It seemed as if I had known he would not. I could say anything to him. My prince, he replied, I admit freely to you what Amin suspects. I've never known a woman as a man knows a woman. But you know women only in that way, which means you don't know them at all. All right, I admitted with a laugh. You have 6 sisters. Perhaps I have a dozen, but since I've never said more than 2 words to any of them at one time, it's possible that you know something I don't. He laughed, too. That warm, low, generous laugh that I had grown to anticipate with such pleasure. It's possible, he said. More possible than you can know. What do you mean? I countered. Nothing. Don't talk in riddles. There should be no secrets between us. There has to be. Nazir, what do you mean? I'll tell you. He paused. Go ahead. Tell me. Someday. I reached out to seize him again, but he must have sensed what I was about to do. He laughed again and began to run. I chased after him. He was not so much out of condition as he had claimed to be some months before. In fact, he was very fast. In a moment, he had passed the servant who walked in front of us. I was faster, and I knew the quayside better than he. Soon he would come to the wooden balustrade separating the dock from the lagoon, and there he would have to pause. I rushed headlong toward it, and reached it a moment after he did. He did not know which way to turn. I put my hands flat against the wall on either side of him, trapping him in place. We were both breathless from the run. I was flushed, and from his rapid, Heavy breathing, I guessed that he was too. "Tell me," I said. "Come on, Nazir. Tell me your secret." "There's no secret, my prince," he said softly. "Truly, there is no secret." We were very close. I could feel the heat rising from his body as it rose in mine. Quickly, I pulled my hands away from the wall. I moved back several steps. "You have nothing to tell me?" I asked. "Nothing to reveal to me?" "No, Maulana." Again, his voice was so low I had to strain to hear it. It seemed to me unwise to remain with him any longer. I clenched my fists and turned my back to him. In a moment I had recovered my usual manner, Prince Mahmud's manner. "Good night, Nazir," I said. "One of my servants will light your way home. Tomorrow I won't see you. An embassy from Alexandria arrived today, and tomorrow there is a state dinner for them. Perhaps we'll meet at the shop the day after." "Yes, Maulana al-Amir." Nazir's voice was cool too, and formal. I turned away and walked back to my servants. I sent Abdullah with Nazir, and, accompanied by Faris, I returned to the palace. Once home again, I called for the slave girl who pleased me most. I had to do something to ease my confusion. But she did not help, and I could not get Nazir out of my head. If he felt as I felt, which I suspected he did, what was he doing at this very moment? What was he thinking about? What was he imagining himself to be? I could not get him out of my head that night, or the next day either. Certainly, since I had known him, since we had begun the night walks in which at last I had been able to unburden my soul to another human being, I had become a more cheerful man. My father had noticed it. All his advisers had noticed it. The air of resignation that I had used to wear was gone. I was actually quite willing to do what I had to do, because I knew a treat and a pleasure waited for me at the end of the day. The company of one with whom I did not have to be anyone but myself. I still felt absurdly happy, perhaps even more so than I had before. But now I was also worried. The next day I moved about the palace so preoccupied by my own thoughts that I bumped into furniture. My father's vizier had to speak to me 3 times to get my attention. At least, so he told me, with some asperity. Since I did not hear him the first 2 times, I would not otherwise have known. I could not join my friends that night because of the state dinner for the Alexandrian embassy. The celebration continued all night. After 10, I stopped counting the courses. Later, the slaves danced. Irina, my favorite, danced the most sinuously of all. But I did not call for her. I let her go, as was polite, to one of the guests. I did not want her anyway. As I sat watching her graceful brown body move under the flickering light of the oil lamps, a thought struck me with such power, such conviction, that I had no room in my mind for anything else. I wanted to rush out of the room, out of the palace, and down to the little house near the bazaar where I knew Nazir lived. I wanted to rush into his room, shake him awake, and confront him with the notion that had just shaken me to the very bottom of my soul. But I did not. Suppose I was wrong. And if I were, what would he make of my accusation? he would be afraid of what I was saying, of what such a statement might imply. I would lose his friendship, his love forever. I could not bear that. Yet my idea must be true. There could be no other explanation for what had happened between us in the darkness the previous night. No other explanation that I could accept. And yet again, how could it be? Everything I knew about women, all my experience of them, denied such a possibility. For after all, Nazir was first and foremost my friend. Therefore, what I suspected could not be true, for if it were true, he could not be my friend. In spite of what he had said, he could not be my friend. It seemed I was destined to be wrong no matter in which direction I turned. My heart insisted on a truth my mind denied. To mention it to Nazir was to risk the loss of his friendship, especially if my mind and not my heart proved correct. Before I dared to say a word to him about my suspicions, I must prove them either right or wrong, beyond the shadow of a doubt. And I must prove them without Nazir's suspecting that I was putting him to a test.